Most people would walk past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you that a small detail on a 1968 Lincoln cent could quietly turn pocket change into something worth serious money? Today we're diving into the 1968 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, yet carries a story that connects American history, minting changes, and some surprisingly valuable collector finds. This isn't just another old penny. It's a snapshot of a turning point in U.S. coin production, and in the right condition, it can be far more than 1 cent. The 1968 Lincoln penny features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like most cents since 1909. On the back, it shows the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 through 2008. But what makes this coin special is something many people overlook: the missing mint mark.in U.S. coins. A small letter under the date usually tells you where the coin was made. A D means Denver. An S means San Francisco. But when there's no letter at all, that means the coin was made in Philadelphia. So when we say 1968 no-mint mark penny, we're talking about a Philadelphia minted coin, and that detail plays a big role in its story. To understand why this penny matters, we need to step back into the late 1960s. America was in the middle of massive change. The Vietnam War was ongoing, the space race was heating up, and inflation was beginning to affect everyday life. But one issue most people didn't notice was happening right in their pockets. Earlier in the decade, silver had been removed from most U.S. coins because the metal itself was becoming too valuable. People started hoarding older coins, hoping their silver content would rise in price. This caused shortages, especially of small change like pennies and nickels. To fix this, the U.S. Mint increased production and even temporarily removed mint marks between 1965 and 1967 to discourage collectors from hoarding coins from specific mints. By 1968, mint marks were officially brought back, but only on coins from Denver and San Francisco. Philadelphia coins continued to have no mint mark. This made 1968 one of the first years in which collectors had to relearn how to read coins again, and that makes the 1968 no mint mark penny a symbol of this transition period. Now let's talk about what this coin is actually made of. The 1968 Lincoln penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it a rich reddish tone when new. It weighs 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters across, the same as most Lincoln cents from that era. The designer of the obverse, Victor David Brenner, originally created Lincoln's portrait in 1909, and by 1968 it had become one of the most recognized images in American coinage. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial shows a small but fascinating detail. If you look closely between the columns, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the building. This makes the Lincoln cent one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. At first glance, millions of these pennies were made, so they aren't rare in the traditional sense. In fact, over 1.7 billion Lincoln cents were struck in Philadelphia in 1968. That's a huge number. But rarity in coin collecting isn't just about how many were made. It's about how many survived in top condition and how many have unusual features or errors. This is where things get interesting. Most 1968 no-mint mark pennies you'll find today are worn from decades of circulation. They've lost their original shine, their details are soft, and they're usually worth only a few cents above face value. But a small percentage of these coins were carefully saved, never circulated, and still show their original mint luster. These high-grade examples are the ones collectors chase. Then there are error coins. During mass production, mistakes happen. Dies wear out, planchets are misaligned, and strikes come out off-center or doubled. Some 1968 no-mint mark pennies were struck with doubled dies, meaning parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled. Others show off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or unusual metal flaws. These errors can transform a 1-cent coin into something worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. One of the most desirable varieties is the 1968 double die obverse penny. On these coins, you might see doubling on the words Liberty or In God We Trust, or in the numbers of the date. These are not shadows or damage, but true minting errors created during the die-making process. Authentic double die coins are scarce, and collectors pay strong premiums for them. Now let's talk real numbers. A typical circulated 1968 no-mint mark penny is usually worth between 2 and 5 cents, mostly for its copper content and age. Uncirculated examples in decent condition often sell for $1 to $3. But when you move into higher grades, especially coins graded by professional services, prices climb fast. A 1968 no mint mark penny graded MS65 red, meaning it still has full red copper color and sharp detail, can sell for around $15 to $30. Coins graded MS66 red can bring $50 to $100 or more. And at the very top of the scale, pristine examples graded MS67 red have sold at auction for several $100s, sometimes crossing the $500 mark depending on demand. Error coins can go even higher. Authentic double die examples from 1968 have sold for hundreds and, in rare cases, over $1,000. Off-center strikes, especially dramatic ones where part of the design is missing but the date is still visible, can bring strong prices as well. These are the kinds of pennies collectors dream about finding in old jars or inherited collections. So how can you tell if your 1968 penny might be something special? First, check the mint mark area under the date. If there's no letter, it's from Philadelphia, which is what we're focusing on today. Next, look closely at the condition. Does the coin still have a bright copper color, or is it dark brown? Are the details sharp on Lincoln's hair and jacket, or are they worn smooth? The better the condition, the more potential value it has. Then, inspect the lettering and date with a magnifying glass. Look for doubling that appears raised and clear, not flat or smeared. True double dies look like a second image slightly offset from the first. If you see something unusual, compare it to known examples online from trusted numismatic sources. Also weigh the coin if possible. A standard 1968 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly off, it could indicate an error or damage. And if you suspect your coin is valuable, avoid cleaning it. Cleaning can destroy collector value instantly, even if the coin looks shinier afterward. As for fakes, most counterfeit pennies aren't very sophisticated, but altered coins do exist. Sometimes people add or remove mint marks to create rarer-looking varieties. On a 1968 penny, that usually isn't the case, since the no mint mark version is normal for Philadelphia. But always be cautious with claims of rare errors, especially if the price seems too good to be true. Professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate and grade coins if you want certainty. Here's a fun fact about the 1968 penny. This was the first year since 1964 that proof coins were made again with mint marks. Proof coins are specially struck for collectors, and in 1968, they were made at the San Francisco Mint and carry an S mint mark. That makes the no mint mark version even more interesting, because it represents the return to traditional minting practices after several years of changes. Another interesting detail is that copper pennies like the 1968 cent have more metal value than modern pennies. Today's pennies are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating, but older cents like this one are solid copper alloy. While it's illegal to melt US coins for their metal value, many collectors enjoy knowing that these older cents contain real copper, giving them a built-in appeal. Collectors also love the 1968 no mint mark penny because it's affordable, accessible, and full of potential. You don't need thousands of dollars to start collecting Lincoln cents. You can search through rolls from the bank, old coin jars, or family collections. And every once in a while, someone really does find a high-grade or error coin hiding in plain sight. There's something exciting about that possibility. You're not just holding a coin. You're holding a piece of American history that passed through countless hands during one of the most transformative decades in the country's story. It may have bought a newspaper, a cup of coffee, or been dropped into a wishing fountain. And now, decades later, it might be sitting in your pocket or drawer, waiting to be noticed. That's why collectors continue to love this coin. It's common enough to find, yet rare enough in top condition to be valuable. It connects everyday life with hidden treasure, and that combination never loses its appeal. So the next time you come across a 1968 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the details. Look for errors. You might be holding something worth far more than 1 cent, and even if it turns out to be just an ordinary coin, you've still discovered a small piece of history, quietly waiting to be appreciated. Because sometimes, the most interesting treasures aren't locked in vaults or museums. They're already in your hands. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary. Yet collectors would gladly pay hundreds, even thousands of dollars for the right version of it. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind one of the most misunderstood modern coins in America, the 1970 Lincoln penny, and why some examples are quietly changing lives. The 1970 Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint and features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like millions of other pennies from the era. At first glance, it doesn't look rare. In fact, more than 2 billion of these coins were minted. But what makes this penny fascinating isn't how common it is. It's what can go wrong with it, what can go unnoticed, and what collectors are willing to pay when the details line up perfectly. To understand this coin, we need to step back into America in 1970. The country was going through major cultural and economic changes. Inflation was rising, copper prices were increasing, and the U.S. Mint was already thinking about cheaper metals for future coins. But in 1970, the Lincoln penny was still made mostly of copper, just like it had been since 1909. This gave the coin a warm reddish tone when new, something collectors still love today. The design on the 1970 penny shows Abraham Lincoln on the front, based on Victor David Brenner's famous portrait. Lincoln faces right with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. Just below the date is the small letter D, showing that it was minted in Denver. On the back, the coin features the Lincoln Memorial with tiny columns and even a small statue of Lincoln visible inside when viewed closely. This design was used from 1959 through 2008 and became one of the most recognizable coin designs in American history. The coin's metal composition is one of its most interesting features. The 1970 penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. That gives it a solid weight of about 3.11 grams and a rich color that deepens with age. These copper pennies feel different in the hand compared to modern zinc pennies, and collectors often say they have more character and warmth. But what really puts the 1970 penny on collectors' radar are its errors and varieties. Most people don't realize that some of the most valuable coins in circulation are mistakes. And the 1970 penny has several that collectors actively search for. One of the most famous varieties connected to 1970 Lincoln cents is the small date versus large date difference, though this is more commonly associated with the Philadelphia Mint. Still, Denver minted coins can show subtle date variations that excite collectors when found in high condition. But the real stars are error coins, especially double dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and wrong metal errors. A double die happens when the coin design is accidentally impressed twice at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On some 1970 pennies, collectors have found doubling on the date, the word Liberty, or Lincoln's eye and jawline. These coins can look blurry or shadowed under magnification, and when confirmed by experts, they can sell for serious money. Another valuable error is an off-center strike, where the design isn't properly centered on the coin blank. This can result in part of the design being missing or shifted. If the date and mint mark are still visible, these errors become especially collectible. Some off-center 1970 pennies have sold for hundreds of dollars depending on how dramatic the strike is. Clipped planchets are another exciting error. This happens when part of the metal blank is cut incorrectly before striking, leaving a curved or straight missing section on the coin. These errors look strange and unmistakable, and collectors love them because no two are exactly alike. Even more rare are wrong metal errors. These occur when a penny blank made for another coin ends up in the penny press. A 1970 penny struck on a dime or foreign coin blank would be extraordinarily valuable, often reaching into the thousands if authenticated. Now, here's where things get really interesting. While most 1970 pennies in circulation are worth only face value, condition changes everything. A coin that has never been circulated, never worn, and still shows its original red copper color can be worth significantly more. These are called mint state red coins, and grading companies examine them carefully for surface quality, strike sharpness, and I appeal that in high grades, especially MS67 red or higher, a 1970 penny can sell for hundreds of dollars. Some have crossed the $1,000 mark at auction when they display exceptional quality and no visible flaws. That's astonishing for a coin that once bought almost nothing. Let's talk real-world sales. Certified 1970 Lincoln cents in top condition have sold for over $1,000 at major auctions. Error versions with dramatic doubling or striking mistakes have sold anywhere from $300 to over $3,000 depending on rarity and demand. These are not guesses. These are documented auction results from collectors who recognize something special in what others would have ignored. So how can you tell if you might have a valuable 1970 D penny? Start with the basics. Check the date and look for the small D mint mark under the year. Then examine the coin's surface closely under good lighting. Look for doubling in the numbers or letters, unusual spacing, or blurry edges. Rotate the coin slowly and look for missing areas, odd shapes, or signs that the design is off-center. Also weigh the coin if possible. A standard copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significant difference could point to an error. Be careful of fakes or altered coins. Some people try to create fake errors by carving, grinding, or squeezing coins. Real mint errors have smooth, natural metal flow and matching wear patterns. Artificial damage often looks rough, sharp-edged, or inconsistent. If you think you've found something special, professional authentication is always worth it. Here's a surprising fact. Millions of 1970 D pennies are still sitting in jars, drawers, and piggy banks across America. Many people unknowingly spend them every day. That means valuable examples could still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. Another fun detail is that copper pennies like the 1970 D are now worth more than face value just for their metal content, though melting them is illegal. Still, it shows how much has changed since these coins were made. A penny that once represented everyday spending power is now a historical artifact of an era before inflation reshaped American currency. Collectors love the 1970 D penny because it sits at the crossroads between old and modern coinage. It represents the end of the classic copper era and the beginning of major changes in how coins were produced. It's affordable for beginners, exciting for error hunters, and meaningful for experienced collectors chasing top-condition examples. There's also something emotional about holding a coin from 1970. That penny may have passed through countless hands during the Vietnam War era, the moon landing decade, and a time of massive cultural change in the United States. It's a tiny, silent witness to history, and sometimes, a surprisingly valuable one. What makes the 1970 D penny especially powerful is how it teaches collectors a simple truth. Value isn't always about age or rarity alone. Sometimes it's about condition. Sometimes it's about mistakes. And sometimes it's about knowing what to look for when everyone else sees nothing special. So the next time you see a handful of pennies, don't rush past them. Look closely at the dates. Look for that small D under 1970. Tilt the coin in the light. Check the letters. Because somewhere out there, a penny struck over 50 years ago could be sitting unnoticed, quietly waiting to tell its story, and maybe change someone's life in the process. And if this simple copper coin can hold this many secrets, imagine what else might be hiding in your pocket right now. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks ordinary, but could quietly be worth far more than 1 cent. Most people would never give it a second glance. But today's coin is one of those pieces hiding in plain sight, and by the end of this video, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. Today we're talking about the 1976 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. This coin came from the Denver Mint during one of the most patriotic years in American history, the nation's bicentennial. While most people focus on special quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins from 1976, the penny from this year has its own story, its own surprises, and in some cases, its own serious collector value. In 1976, the United States was celebrating 200 years of independence. Special designs appeared on many coins, especially quarters with the colonial drummer and bicentennial dates. But the Lincoln cent stayed visually the same, carrying the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Even though it didn't get a special bicentennial design, it was still part of one of the largest and most meaningful minting years in American history. Millions of Americans were saving coins, collecting souvenirs, and feeling connected to the country's past, and the humble penny quietly joined that celebration. The Denver Mint produced over 4.2 billion pennies in 1976, making it one of the highest mintage Lincoln cents ever struck. With a number that large, you might assume every 1976 D penny is common and nearly worthless. And in many cases, that's true. Most circulated examples are worth just 1 cent. But within that massive production run are rare varieties, high-grade examples, and minting mistakes that collectors actively hunt for today. Let's talk about what this coin looks like and what makes it unique. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and to the right is the date, 1976, along with the small D mint mark just below it, showing it was struck in Denver. On the reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, with the words United States of America, across the top, E pluribus unum, above the building, and 1 cent at the bottom. Inside the memorial, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. In terms of metal, the 1976 D penny is made mostly of copper. At that time, pennies were 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them a solid, heavy feel compared to modern cents. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to copper-plated zinc pennies, making older copper cents like this one more desirable to collectors who prefer the traditional metal composition. So why would a penny with billions minted ever be valuable? The answer comes down to condition, rarity within varieties, and minting errors. Most 1976 D pennies that circulated in pocket change show wear, dull color, and surface marks. But coins that survived in perfect condition, especially those with sharp details, original red copper color, and no damage, can sell for surprising amounts. Collectors use a grading scale to evaluate coins, with higher grades meaning better condition. A typical circulated 1976 D penny might be worth only face value, but one graded mint state 65 or higher can be worth several dollars. And coins graded MS 67 or above, which means nearly flawless under magnification, can sell for hundreds of dollars. In rare cases, top condition examples have crossed the $1,000 mark at auction. Then there are error coins, which is where things get really interesting. Some 1976 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design isn't properly aligned on the coin blank. Others were double-struck, creating overlapping images. Some show weak or missing mint marks, while others have die cracks, die chips, or even dramatic mistakes like clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing due to a cutting error during production. These errors turn ordinary pennies into collectible treasures. One particularly sought-after variety involves double die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a misaligned die during striking. While the 1976 D penny isn't famous for major double die varieties like some earlier years, minor doubling does exist and can add value, especially when clearly visible on the date or lettering. Let's look at real-world examples. In recent auctions, a 1976 D penny graded MS 67 red has sold for several $100s. One exceptional specimen graded MS 68 red sold for over $1,000, showing how condition alone can transform a 1-cent coin into a 4-figure collectible. Error coins from this year, depending on the type and severity of the mistake, have sold anywhere from $50 to several $100s, and in rare dramatic cases, even more. Now you might be wondering how to tell if your 1976 D penny is real, valuable, or just another common cent. First, check the date and mint mark. Look for 1976 with a small d under the date. Make sure the coin feels solid and weighs about 3.11 grams, which is typical for copper cents of this era. Modern zinc pennies feel lighter by comparison. Next, examine the coin's condition. Look for sharp details on Lincoln's hair and coat, clear lettering, and minimal scratches or spots. A bright red or reddish-orange color usually indicates a higher-grade coin, while brown or dull surfaces suggest circulation wear. Then look closely for errors. Use a magnifying glass to check for doubling in the letters or numbers, off-center designs, missing parts, or unusual textures, AS for fakes. Counterfeit pennies are rare because the face value is so low, but altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify dates or mint marks to imitate rarer coins. Always compare your coin to known examples, and, if you believe you've found something special, consider having it authenticated by a professional grading service. Here's something most people don't realize. The copper in a 1976 penny is worth more than 1 cent based on metal value alone. While it's illegal to melt US cents for profit, the intrinsic copper value adds another layer of interest to pre-1982 pennies like this one. Some collectors even sort and save copper cents simply because they represent a disappearing part of American coinage history. Another fun fact is that while the bicentennial coins changed designs, the Lincoln cent remained visually unchanged, making 1976 one of the last major national celebration years where the penny stayed traditional. That makes it a kind of quiet witness to history, circulating alongside fireworks, parades, and patriotic events without ever announcing its role in the celebration. Collectors also enjoy building year and mint sets of Lincoln pennies, and the 1976 D is a key piece in completing a full modern collection. For beginners, it's easy to find and affordable, making it a perfect entry point into coin collecting. For advanced collectors, finding one in top-grade condition or with a rare error becomes a serious challenge and a rewarding hunt. There's something special about coins like this. They remind us that history doesn't always come in the form of rare gold pieces or ancient artifacts. Sometimes it comes in the form of a penny that passed through countless hands, sat in cash registers, and jingled in pockets during one of the most patriotic years in American history. Most of those pennies are still out there today, hiding in jars, drawers, and old collections, waiting to be rediscovered. And that's what makes the 1976 D Lincoln penny so fascinating. It's common, yet it can be rare. It's ordinary, yet in the right condition, it can be extraordinary. It's a simple coin with a powerful story, connecting everyday Americans to the nation's past in a way few objects can. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1976 with a small D under the year, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Check its condition. Search for errors, because that 1-cent coin might just be worth far more than you ever imagined. And who knows, the most valuable coin you'll ever own might already be sitting in your pocket right now, quietly waiting for you to notice it. What if the penny sitting in your pocket right now isn't just spare change, but a quiet piece of American history with a story far bigger than its 1-cent face value? Today, we're uncovering the truth behind one of the most misunderstood modern coins in circulation, the 1979 D Lincoln penny, and why some examples are worth far more than you might expect. The 1979 D penny is a 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark beneath the date on the front of the coin. At first glance, it looks just like most Lincoln pennies from the late 20th century. Abraham Lincoln faces right on the front, while the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. It feels ordinary, and that's exactly why so many people overlook it. But within this common design lies a fascinating story tied to America's economy, its metal shortages, and a time of major change in U.S. coin production. To understand this penny, we have to go back to the late 1970s. America was dealing with rising inflation, high energy costs, and growing concerns over the price of metals. Copper prices were climbing, and the government was searching for ways to reduce the cost of producing coins. The penny, which had traditionally been made mostly of copper, was becoming increasingly expensive to mint. Although the full switch to zinc wouldn't happen until 1982, the late 1970s marked the beginning of that transition period, when every cent counted. Literally. In 1979, the Denver Mint produced more than 4 billion Lincoln pennies. That number alone tells you this coin wasn't rare when it was released. These pennies entered circulation quickly and heavily, and most Americans likely handled dozens of them without giving them a second thought. But high production doesn't always mean low interest, especially when time, condition, and mistakes come into play. The 1979 D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it a weight of about 3.11 grams. This copper-heavy composition gives older pennies their warm reddish tone when new and a darker brown color as they age. The front of the coin features Victor David Brenner's classic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to honor Lincoln's 100th birthday. The back shows the Lincoln Memorial, which had replaced the wheat ears design in 1959. If you look closely between the pillars of the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside, one of the smallest detailed designs ever used on a circulating U.S. coin. While most 1979 D pennies are common, collectors search carefully for special examples. One of the biggest reasons this coin draws attention is because of errors. Errors happen during the minting process, and when they do, they can create coins that are dramatically different from standard ones, and often much more valuable. One known error for 1979 D pennies is the off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin planchet isn't properly positioned under the dies, causing part of the design to be missing or shifted. Depending on how off-center the strike is, these coins can sell for anywhere from $20 to several $100s. Another popular error is the double die, where parts of the design, especially the date or lettering, appear doubled. These are rare, but when verified, they can command serious collector interest. There are also clipped planchet errors, where a piece of the coin's edge is missing due to a cutting mistake during blank preparation. Some 1979D clipped pennies have sold for $30 to over $100 depending on size and condition. Even minor minting flaws like die cracks or weak strikes can add collectible value, especially when preserved in high grades. Condition plays an even bigger role in value than errors. Most 1979D pennies today are worn from circulation and worth exactly 1 cent. But coins that were pulled from circulation early and preserved in near-perfect condition, especially those graded by professional services, can sell for much more. A 1979D penny graded MS67 red, meaning nearly flawless with full original copper color, has sold at auction for over $300. Even MS66 examples regularly sell for $50 to $100. That might not sound life-changing, but for a coin that originally cost 1 cent, that's an impressive return. So how do you know if your 1979D penny is special? First, check for the D mint mark just below the date on the front of the coin. Next, examine the color. Red or bright copper coins usually indicate minimal circulation, while brown coins have been exposed to air and wear over time. Use a magnifying glass to inspect the lettering and date. Look for doubling, unusual spacing, or missing details. Check the edges for any unusual clips or shapes. And weigh the coin if possible. A genuine copper 1979 penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. Fake pennies from this era are rare, but altered coins do exist. Some people attempt to modify coins to mimic valuable errors by filing edges or altering dates. A real mint error usually shows smooth metal flow and natural surfaces, while altered coins often have rough textures or unnatural shapes. If you believe you've found something unusual, professional grading services can authenticate your coin and assign it an official grade. Here's something surprising about the 1979D penny. Even though billions were made, finding one in pristine condition today is actually difficult. Copper is soft, and these coins were heavily circulated. Many were scratched, discolored, or damaged within just a few years. That's why high-grade examples are so desirable. They represent a moment frozen in time, untouched by pockets, vending machines, and decades of daily use. Another fascinating detail is how this penny represents the final years of America's traditional copper cent. Just 3 years later, in 1982, the mint switched to zinc cores with copper plating, changing the feel, sound, and long-term durability of the penny forever. The 1979D penny belongs to the last generation of true copper circulation cents, making it historically meaningful even beyond its face value. Collectors today love the 1979D penny not because it's rare in general, but because it's a challenge. The hunt is about finding the best possible example among billions of ordinary ones. It's about spotting that one coin that somehow survived decades without wear, or discovering a tiny minting mistake that slipped through quality control and entered circulation unnoticed. That thrill of discovery is what keeps coin collecting alive, even in modern times. This coin also appeals to new collectors because it's accessible. You don't need thousands of dollars to get started. You can search rolls from the bank, check old jars of change, or look through family collections. Every 1979D penny you examine brings the possibility, however small, that you've found something special. And even when you don't, you're holding a piece of American history that passed through countless hands during a unique era of economic change. There's also something poetic about a penny like this. It wasn't meant to be rare. It wasn't struck for collectors. It was made for everyday use, to buy newspapers, make exact change, and move quietly through the economy. Yet decades later, it's become a window into the past, a reminder of how even the smallest objects can tell big stories. So the next time you see a 1979D penny, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Check the date, the mint mark, the color, and the details. You might just be holding a coin that's worth more than its weight in copper, or at the very least, a small piece of America's monetary history hiding in plain sight. And here's the real question. How many rare or valuable coins have already passed through your hands without you ever knowing? That thought alone makes every penny worth checking, because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins turn out to have the most extraordinary stories. Most people would walk past this penny without giving it a second glance. But what if I told you that a 1985 D Lincoln cent sitting quietly in someone's change jar once sold for thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering why this everyday-looking coin has become one of the most quietly interesting pennies in modern American history. The coin we're talking about is the 1985 D Lincoln penny, struck at the Denver Mint and released into circulation nearly 40 years ago. At first glance, it looks like millions of other Lincoln cents. Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, and that small D mint mark just below the date. But behind this ordinary appearance is a story of massive production, surprising errors, and a few rare examples that have turned spare change into serious money. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the mid-1980s. In 1985, the United States was deep into the era of modern coin production. Cash was still king, vending machines were everywhere, and billions of pennies were needed to keep the economy moving. That year alone, the Denver Mint struck over 5.2 billion Lincoln cents, making the 1985 D penny one of the most heavily produced coins in U.S. history. But mass production doesn't mean perfection. In fact, when mints produce coins by the billions, small mistakes become inevitable. And sometimes, those mistakes turn into collector treasures. The design of the 1985 D penny follows the familiar Lincoln Memorial style introduced in 1959. On the front, or obverse, you see Abraham Lincoln's right-facing portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty. To the left is the date 1985. And just beneath it sits the Denver Mint mark, a small D. Around the edge runs the phrase, "In God We Trust." On the reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln's statue visible between the columns if you look closely. Above it reads United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. It's a clean, classic design that Americans had grown used to by the 1980s. Now, here's something many people don't realize. By 1985, pennies were no longer made primarily of copper. Rising copper prices in the early 1980s forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition. The 1985 D penny is made mostly of zinc, with a thin copper coating. It weighs about 2.5 grams, compared to older copper cents that weighed over 3 grams. This change saved money, but it also created new types of errors, especially plating issues that collectors still hunt for today. So if billions of these were made, why would any of them be valuable? The answer lies in condition and errors. Most 1985 D pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples usually sell for only a few cents or a couple of dollars. But certain coins from this year and mint have become highly sought after because of unusual mistakes during the minting process. One of the most famous is the double die obverse variety. On these coins, parts of the design, especially the date and lettering, appear doubled as if they were slightly stamped twice. This is not damage. It happens when the die used to strike the coin is misaligned during its creation. The result is a coin with clear doubling that collectors consider a true mint error. Some 1985 double die obverse pennies from the Denver Mint have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on their condition and how strong the doubling appears. In top mint state condition, certified examples have reached over $2,000 at auction, and in rare cases, even higher. Another valuable variety is the off-center strike. These coins were not properly aligned when struck, leaving part of the design missing and blank metal showing on one side. If the date and mint mark are still visible, these coins can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on how dramatic the offset is. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin blank was improperly cut before striking, leaving a curved missing section. These errors are less dramatic than off-center strikes, but still collectible and often sell for $20 to $100 or more. Then there are broad strikes, where the coin spreads wider than normal because the collar that shapes the coin fails during striking. These coins look slightly oversized and thinner than normal and can also bring premium prices. Perhaps the most fascinating errors, though, are wrong planchet errors. These happen when a penny design is struck on a blank meant for another denomination or metal type. While extremely rare for modern cents, a genuine 1985 penny struck on a foreign or incorrect blank can sell for thousands. Now let's talk about real-world value examples. A 1985 D double die obverse penny graded MS65 red by a major grading service sold at auction for over $2,000. Another example in slightly lower condition sold for around $800. Even circulated double die examples can bring $100 to $300 if the doubling is clear and authentic. High-grade regular strikes can also surprise people. A standard 1985 D penny graded MS67 red, meaning near perfect condition, has sold for over $1,000. That's not because it's rare in general, but because it's rare in that flawless state. With billions produced, very few survived without any marks, scratches, or wear. So how do you tell if you might have a valuable one? Start with the date and mint mark. Make sure it says 1985 and has a small d beneath the date. Then examine the lettering closely, especially Liberty, In God We Trust, and the numbers in the date. If you see strong doubling that looks raised and part of the design, not blurry or smeared, that's a promising sign. Next, check the condition. A shiny surface, full original luster, and sharp details increase value significantly. Even tiny scratches or dull coloring can reduce value dramatically. For error coins, look for off-center strikes, missing metal, strange shapes, or unusual thickness. But be cautious. Damage from circulation, tools, or heat can look like errors but are not valuable. Real mint errors follow specific patterns and often need expert verification. The best way to confirm authenticity is through professional grading services, especially if you think you've found a double die or major error. These services authenticate, grade, and encapsulate the coin, making it easier to sell and trust in the collector market. Here's a fun fact most people don't know. Because 1985 pennies are mostly zinc, the copper plating can bubble or peel over time if exposed to moisture. This creates blistered surfaces that look unusual, but these are considered damage, not mint errors, and they don't add value. In fact, collectors usually avoid them. Another interesting detail is that the Denver Mint produced more pennies in 1985 than many earlier years combined. Yet, despite this massive output, finding top-condition examples today is surprisingly difficult. Most went straight into circulation and stayed there for decades, picking up scratches, stains, and wear. Collectors love the 1985 D penny because it sits at a fascinating point in modern coin history. It represents the full shift into zinc-based cents, the peak years of high-volume minting, and an era when error varieties became more widely discovered and documented by everyday collectors. It's also a favorite among beginners. Many people start coin collecting by searching through pocket change or old jars at home, and the 1985 D penny is exactly the kind of coin that teaches an important lesson. Most coins are common, but a few rare varieties hidden among them can change everything. Imagine checking your spare change one night and realizing the penny you almost tossed aside could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That possibility is what keeps collectors searching. And even if you never find a high-value error, coins like the 1985 D penny connect us to everyday American history. They passed through millions of hands, paid for newspapers, snacks, bus rides, and groceries. Each one carries a silent story of daily life in the 1980s. Today, the 1985 D Lincoln penny remains one of the most accessible coins for collectors to hunt. It's affordable, widely available, and still holds the excitement of discovery. Every roll of pennies from the bank or jar from a drawer could contain one of those rare varieties. So the next time you see a 1985 penny with a small D beneath the date, don't ignore it. Take a closer look. You might just be holding a coin that proves even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories, and sometimes extraordinary value. And who knows, the next life-changing coin might already be sitting in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. What if I told you that one of the most overlooked pennies in your pocket could still hold a secret story, a hidden twist, and in rare cases, real collector value? Today, we're uncovering the truth behind the 1991 D Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have handled without ever stopping to look closely. This coin is a 1-cent piece struck in 1991 at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small D mint mark beneath the date on the front. At first glance, it looks like any modern penny, but behind its simple appearance is a fascinating story of American coinage during a time of major change. Whether you collect coins or just enjoy checking your spare change, this penny deserves a second look. The year 1991 was part of a major transition period in U.S. coin history. For decades, pennies were made mostly from copper, but rising metal prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition in the early 1980s. By 1991, The Lincoln cent was made of zinc with a thin copper coating, giving it the same look as older copper pennies but at a much lower cost to produce. Millions were struck that year, especially at the Denver Mint, making this one of the most widely circulated coins of the modern era. Even though production numbers were high, every coin still carries the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, whose portrait has appeared on the penny since 1909. On the front of the coin, you'll see Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" along the top, "Liberty" to the left, and the date with the D Mint mark to the right. The reverse side features the Lincoln Memorial, which was used on pennies from 1959 through 2008. If you look closely between the pillars of the memorial, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, making this one of the most detailed reverse designs ever used on U.S. coins. The metal composition of the 1991 D penny is 97.5% zinc with a thin copper plating, giving it a weight of about 2.5 grams. This lighter weight compared to older copper cents is one of the easiest ways to tell them apart. While the design stayed the same for decades, small details in strike quality, surface finish, and minting errors are what give certain examples extra value today. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even though most 1991 D pennies are worth just 1 cent, some rare varieties and mint errors have turned ordinary-looking coins into collector treasures. These errors happen during the minting process and can include off-center strikes, double strikes, clipped planchets, or double die varieties where parts of the design appear doubled. These mistakes are uncommon, but when they occur, collectors take notice. One of the most sought-after types is a double die obverse, where parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled when viewed under magnification. Another valuable type is an off-metal strike, where a penny is accidentally struck on the wrong type of blank, such as one meant for a different coin. These mistakes are rare, but they can push the value of a modern penny into the hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on the condition and severity of the error. Condition also plays a huge role in value. Most 1991 D pennies in circulation are worn and dull, but uncirculated examples with bright original luster can sell for several dollars, especially if they grade high on the coin grading scale. Coins graded MS-67 or higher by professional grading services can command impressive prices because very few survive in that condition after decades of circulation. There have been real auction results that surprised many collectors. High-grade 1991 D Lincoln cents have sold for over $100, and error varieties have reached much higher amounts. In some cases, dramatic mint errors like major off-center strikes or broad strikes have sold for several $100s. These are not everyday finds, but they prove that even a modern penny can hold serious value under the right circumstances. So, how do you know if your 1991 D penny is something special or just spare change? Start by checking the date and mint mark. Make sure it reads 1991, with a small d beneath it. Next, weigh the coin if you can. It should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier, it could be a rare copper planchet error, which would be extremely valuable. Then, look closely at the lettering, date, and Lincoln's profile under magnification. If you see doubling, strange distortions, missing details, or uneven edges, you might be looking at a mint error. Authenticity is also important. Real U.S. pennies have sharp, clean edges and consistent design details. Counterfeit pennies are rare, but altered coins do exist, especially when people try to fake rare errors. If you believe you've found something unusual, the best step is to have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the Lincoln Memorial design looks simple, it's one of the only U.S. coin designs that shows a real historical figure twice on the same coin. Lincoln appears on the front, and his statue appears again inside the memorial on the back. That tiny detail often goes unnoticed, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Another interesting detail is that 1991 was just a few years before the U.S. Mint began experimenting with alternative metals for the penny due to rising zinc costs. While the composition didn't change again until much later, the 1991 penny sits right in the middle of the modern era of coin production, making it a time capsule of late 20th century minting technology. Collectors today love the 1991 D penny not because it's rare in general, but because it represents the thrill of searching. It's the kind of coin that reminds people that valuable discoveries don't always come from old chests or forgotten vaults. Sometimes they come from a handful of change in your pocket or a jar on your dresser. For new collectors, This coin is often a starting point, an invitation to look closer at everyday money and uncover the stories hiding in plain sight. The appeal also lies in the hunt for perfection. Finding a high-grade, uncirculated example from circulation is extremely difficult, and that challenge is what excites collectors. Others focus on error hunting, carefully searching rolls of pennies in hopes of discovering a rare mint mistake. The 1991 D penny, with its massive production numbers, gives collectors endless opportunities to search, compare, and learn. What makes this coin truly special is not its average value, but its potential. 99% of these pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. But the remaining fraction, the ones with rare errors or exceptional condition, remind us that even modern coins can hold surprises. It's not about guaranteed riches. It's about curiosity, attention, and the excitement of discovery. So the next time you see a 1991 D penny, don't dismiss it. Hold it up to the light. Look at Lincoln's face, the sharpness of the lettering, the tiny statue inside the memorial. Ask yourself where it's been, whose hands it passed through, and whether it might be one of the rare exceptions hiding among millions of ordinary coins. Because sometimes, the most unassuming objects carry the most interesting stories. And in the world of coin collecting, even a single penny can turn curiosity into discovery, and discovery into something truly unforgettable. Most people walk past pennies on the ground without a second thought, but what if I told you that one ordinary-looking penny from 1994 could be hiding a story far more valuable than its face value? Today we're diving into the 1994 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that many Americans have unknowingly spent, saved, or tossed into jars without realizing what makes it special. At first glance, it looks like just another copper-colored cent. But behind that simple design is a fascinating history, subtle details, and a collector's story that still surprises people today. The 1994 Lincoln penny was produced during a time when pennies were still very much a part of daily life. Vending machines, parking meters, and everyday purchases all relied on small change, and the U.S. Mint struck billions of cents every year to meet demand. When a penny has no mint mark, it means it was made in Philadelphia, the main mint of the United States and the oldest operating mint in the country. In 1994, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 6.5 billion Lincoln cents, which makes the year seem anything but rare. But coins aren't judged by numbers alone. Some years become interesting because of changes in metal, minting technology, or unexpected errors that slipped into circulation. And the 1994 no-mint mark penny sits right in the middle of several important shifts in modern coin history. By the early 1980s, the U.S. Mint had changed the penny's composition from mostly copper to mostly zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. This was done to reduce costs, since copper prices had risen sharply. By 1994, the zinc-based penny was standard, weighing 2.5 grams instead of the heavier 3.11 grams of earlier copper cents. Most people never noticed the difference, but collectors did, because weight and metal content play a big role in identifying valuable varieties and errors. The design of the 1994 penny features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909. Lincoln faces right with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, which had been used since 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated in the center, making it one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. So what makes the 1994 no-mint mark penny interesting if billions were made? The answer lies in condition, varieties, and minting mistakes. Most 1994 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent in circulated condition. But collectors search for coins that stand out, especially those with sharp details, flawless surfaces, or unusual errors. One of the most talked about varieties from 1994 involves double dies. A double die happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing letters or numbers to appear doubled on the finished coin. On some 1994 pennies, collectors have found doubling in the date or in the word "Liberty." These aren't easy to spot with the naked eye, but under magnification, the extra thickness or split edges in the lettering become clear. Genuine double dies can significantly increase a coin's value, especially in high-grade condition. Another type of error collectors look for is off-metal strikes. While extremely rare, a penny struck on the wrong planchet, such as one intended for a dime or foreign coin, can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. There have also been cases of broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the collar that shapes its edge, resulting in a wider, flatter coin. Die cracks, die chips, and clipped planchets are other errors sometimes found on 1994 cents, each adding its own appeal to collectors. Condition is everything in modern coins, and that's where the 1994 no-mint mark penny can really shine. A circulated example with wear, scratches, or discoloration usually holds only face value. But a coin in uncirculated condition, especially one graded by a professional service like PCGS or NGC, can bring surprising prices. A 1994 penny graded MS67 red, meaning nearly perfect with full original color, has sold at auction for over $400. Even slightly lower grades like MS65 red can sell for $20 to $50 depending on eye appeal. For error coins, the prices climb even higher. A genuine double-die 1994 penny in strong condition can sell for anywhere from $100 to several $100s. More dramatic errors like off-center strikes or wrong planchet strikes can reach into the thousands depending on how unusual and visually striking they are. So how can you tell if you might have something special? Start with the basics. Check the front of the coin below the date. If there's no letter there, that means it was made in Philadelphia, which is correct for a no-mint mark penny. Next, examine the date and lettering closely under a magnifying glass. Look for signs of doubling, extra thickness, or separation in the numbers or letters. Then weigh the coin. A standard 1994 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier or lighter, that could indicate an off-metal strike or other error. Also look at the edges and overall shape. A normal penny should be perfectly round with a smooth edge. If it looks wider than usual, clipped, or uneven, it could be a mint error worth investigating further. And if your coin looks unusually shiny, sharp, and clean, especially if it appears untouched by circulation, it might be worth having it professionally graded. It's important to know that genuine counterfeits of modern pennies are rare, simply because the value usually doesn't justify the effort. However, altered coins do exist, especially when people try to create fake double dies or unusual varieties. If you suspect your coin is valuable, the safest route is to send it to a trusted grading service or show it to a reputable coin dealer who specializes in U.S. coins. Here's a fun fact. The year 1994 is part of the final stretch of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design, which ended in 2008. In 2009, the Mint released special one-year designs to honor Lincoln's life, followed by the Union Shield reverse starting in 2010. That means the 1994 penny represents one of the last decades of a design that had already been on coins for more than 30 years, making it a quiet piece of modern American history. Another surprising detail is just how many of these coins still survive in mint condition. Because pennies were often saved in rolls and jars during the 1990s, large numbers of uncirculated examples still exist today. But truly top-grade coins, those with perfect color, no spots, and razor-sharp strikes, are far rarer than the mintage numbers suggest. That's why collectors compete so strongly for the highest-graded examples. Collectors love the 1994 no-mint mark penny not because it's ancient or made of precious metal, but because it represents the thrill of the hunt. It's the idea that something so common could hide something uncommon. Many collectors started their hobby by searching through everyday change, and coins like this remind us that valuable finds don't always come from treasure chests or auctions. Sometimes they come from your pocket. There's also a deeper appeal. Coins from the 1990s connect many people to childhood memories, allowance money, vending machines, and trips to the corner store. For collectors, holding a 1994 penny in perfect condition feels like holding a tiny time capsule from that era, frozen exactly as it left the mint nearly 3 decades ago. So the next time you see a 1994 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Check the details. Weigh it. Study the lettering. You might be holding nothing more than a single cent, or you might be holding a small piece of numismatic history with a story worth far more than its face value. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking coins carry the most unexpected secrets. And that's what makes coin collecting so powerful. Every coin has a story, The only question is whether you're willing to look closely enough to discover it. Have you ever looked at a penny in your pocket and wondered if it could secretly be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked modern coins in America, the 1997 D. Lincoln penny, and why some collectors are willing to pay serious money for the right one. At first glance, this coin looks completely ordinary. It's a brown copper-colored penny with Abraham Lincoln's face on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But what makes the 1997 D penny interesting is not just how common it seems, it's how unpredictable its value can be. In the right condition or with the right error, this everyday coin can become something truly special. The 1997 D Lincoln cent was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small D mint mark below the date on the front of the coin. This penny belongs to the long-running Lincoln Memorial series, which began in 1959 and ended in 2008. These coins were made to honor Abraham Lincoln and to serve as practical money for everyday use, but some years ended up telling unexpected stories through minting mistakes and rare condition examples. In 1997, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies because demand for small change was still strong. Vending machines, parking meters, and everyday cash transactions all depended on 1-cent coins. The Denver Mint alone struck over 3.5 billion pennies that year, making the 1997 D one of the most widely produced coins of its time. That might sound like bad news for collectors, but high mintage doesn't always mean low value, especially when condition and errors enter the picture. Let's take a closer look at what this coin is made of. Unlike older Lincoln cents from before 1982, which were mostly copper, the 1997 D penny is made from zinc with a thin copper coating. It weighs 2.5 grams and measures 19 millimeters across. The front shows Lincoln's profile facing right, designed by Victor David Brenner, with the words "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date. The back shows the Lincoln Memorial, with tiny statues of Lincoln visible inside if you look closely. Most 1997 D pennies you'll find today are worn from years of circulation. But the ones that collectors chase are the sharp, shiny examples that never entered circulation, known as uncirculated or mint state coins. These can look almost brand new, with full original luster and no visible wear. And that's where values start to climb. But condition alone isn't the only factor. Errors play a major role in making some 1997 D pennies extremely desirable. One of the most well-known errors from this year is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank isn't properly aligned during striking, causing part of the design to be missing while another part is stretched toward the edge. The more dramatic and well-centered the error, the more valuable the coin becomes. Another important error collectors look for is a double die variety. This occurs when the coin design is accidentally impressed twice at slightly different angles, creating a doubled appearance on letters or numbers. On some 1997 D pennies, collectors have discovered doubling in areas like Liberty, the date, or Lincoln's features. These are subtle and often require magnification, but once confirmed, they can dramatically increase the coin's value. There are also repunched mint marks and clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing due to a cutting error during blank production. These unusual shapes catch collectors' attention because they represent rare mistakes that slipped past quality control and entered circulation. So how valuable can a 1997 D penny really be? In average circulated condition, it's usually worth face value, just 1 cent. Even clean circulated examples might only bring a few cents. But uncirculated coins in top condition can sell for several dollars, especially if graded by a professional service. High-grade examples graded MS-67 or higher have sold at auction for over $100, and in some cases closer to $200, depending on eye appeal and strike quality. Error coins go much higher. A strong off-center strike with clear date and mint mark can sell for $50 to $300 or more. Double die varieties, depending on strength and visibility, can bring anywhere from $75 to several $100s. These aren't lottery wins, but they're impressive returns for a coin that started as pocket change. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1997 D penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the date and mint mark carefully. The D should appear just below the date on the front of the coin. The font should match known genuine examples, with clean edges and no signs of tampering. Some altered coins have fake mint marks added, and under magnification, these often look raised, rough, or glued on. Next, weigh the coin. A genuine 1997 D penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. A significant difference could suggest damage, plating, or tampering. Then look closely at the surfaces. Genuine mint errors show natural flow lines and metal movement, while fake errors often show tool marks or unnatural cuts. If you suspect you've found something rare, consider having it authenticated and graded by a reputable grading service. This not only confirms the coin's legitimacy but can also dramatically increase its resale value by giving buyers confidence. Now here's something surprising. Many of the most valuable 1997 D pennies were discovered years after they were minted, sometimes in old rolls, piggy banks, or jars of spare change. Because people assume modern pennies aren't worth anything, these coins often sit unnoticed for decades. That's part of what makes searching for them so exciting. Every handful of change becomes a treasure hunt. Another fun fact is that although billions were made, only a tiny fraction survive today in pristine condition. Most were spent, scratched, dropped, and worn down. That's why high-grade examples are so hard to find. It's not that the coin itself was rare. It's that preserving it perfectly over time was. Collectors also enjoy the 1997 D penny because it represents a turning point era in American coinage. This was near the end of the Lincoln Memorial design, which would be replaced by the Lincoln Bicentennial reverses in 2009 and later the Union Shield. To many collectors, these late 1990s coins feel like the final chapter of a long-running design tradition. Another reason collectors love this coin is accessibility. You don't need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to get started. Anyone can search pocket change, bank rolls, or inherited collections. That sense of discovery, the idea that a valuable coin might already be in your home, keeps collectors coming back year after year. There's also something deeply satisfying about finding beauty and value in something most people overlook. The 1997 D penny teaches us that rarity doesn't always come from age alone. Sometimes it comes from mistakes, survival, and attention to detail. A coin struck in the billions can still become special if it stands out in the right way, so the next time you see a 1997 penny with a small D beneath the date, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Check its shine. Look for doubling, missing metal, or unusual shapes. You might be holding something far more interesting than spare change. Coins like the 1997 D Lincoln penny remind us that history isn't always locked behind museum glass. Sometimes it's hiding in your pocket, your couch cushions, or an old jar on a shelf. And every once in a while, one of those small copper-colored discs tells a story worth far more than 1 cent. So keep looking, keep learning, and keep checking your change, because the next great discovery might already be in your hands, waiting to be noticed.